Hello, my name is Brant Hunt. My channel is simply called Discerning What is True. Today is the November the 11th, 2025. I'm going to be reading again from the words of a particular Kabbalist long ago, not long ago, roughly 100 years ago. And the title of the book is called simply Psychology and Kabbalah. Chapter 23 is what I'm going through, which is called Maturation. So thank you for being here. And let's get into the reading here. Hope everyone's doing well today. Quite cold here in the south where I live at. It's supposed to get pretty cold tonight also. In many societies, puberty is marked by a ceremony called by some the quote rites of passage. In Judaism, the bar mitzvah celebration marks a boy's coming of age when he is called up in the synagogue to read a portion of the law. What is being symbolized is that he is no longer the responsibility of his parents, that he knows the rules of conduct as set out in the Torah and can take on the role of adult. In early Middle Eastern society, where maturity occurred with greater rapidity, it was not unusual for a youth or mind to be married at 14, but this was within a strong family situation in which the couple were still protected by the clan. Today in the West, the situation is quite different. At this puberty point, we see the onset of the search for identity as the person moves into the Had, Nezah, Tiferet triad of awakening. By the time an individual has passed into full adolescence, there is a massive shift in the balance between body and psyche. The physicality is sexually mature and all the physical systems are working up to their maximum efficiency. The psyche, however, is often still that of a juvenile. This causes at times such much conflict as adults begin to expect the person to take on some adult burdens. In so-called less sophisticated societies, the boys are sent out into the fields or the world by themselves to prove all the skills they have learned so that it will be seen that they can survive and support themselves and thereafter a family. When this is done, they are accepted as men and will be treated as such by the adults of the community. In Western society, no such equivalent exists. The examination system and apprenticeship scheme do cover some aspects of the problem, but unless a person is part of a tight-knit community that holds to ancient traditions, there is no way that your transition from childhood to adulthood can be guided for the side pillars of superego or ego idea, or at this point often rejected. This creates an instability for the Yasada ego. Is rarely strong enough to hold the shuddering psychological tree during this critical period. The reason for such disruption during the process of adolescence is that all the experiences acquired in childhood is under pressure. In some, the impulsive energy of Nezah is held by the rules of Had and repression, which gives rise to nervous tension. In others, it is the reverse, with a opposition to anything that rational or conformist. In some cases, the Nezah pursuit of pleasure and excitement takes over completely as the Yasada ego adopts the latest fashions and does everything to reject the superego idea values of their parents. This pursuit of new image seeks not only to be outrageous and attract attention from the opposite sex, but also to find a persona with which the individual can identify. In some, several different masks are put on over a short time. In others, there is still a holding on to the conservative mode, but with a view of changing it. Here we see the active and passive pillars at work, according to the loading of the psyche with the intelligence of the Had, enhanced by the power of Nezah, curiously widen out and becomes charged with a nobility, sorry, not nobility, novelty, I should say, emerges and everything is done for every effort, or not effort, but effect. Okay. Relationships become hypersensitive and intense as the feeling triad is fully activated with each person seeking a companion to mirror the Yasada view they have of themselves. Indeed, the phenomenon of narcissism returns for a while as people look for their own kind or that which is the total opposite to complement their image, such as a beauty attraction of blondes and brunettes in a refined girl taking on a crude lover, or the reverse as the shadow side of the nefesh, i.e., is released in a Nazareth affair. The same can be said of young people who break out of the bonds of a conventional upbringing and take to drugs and crime. This is the violent oscillation of the psychology tree as it's desperately searches for a new equilibrium in the dynamic period of youth. The Ha, Tiferet, and Nasad triad of awakening, which is now being activated, brings about a acute awareness of the world around and its imperfection, as Tiferet is touched upon, while the great vegetable triad, dominated by the Yasada ego, pursues its new thoughts, feelings, and actions on the personal level. The path between the ego and the self, called integrity in Kabbalah, is alerted. This gives rise in many advanced adolescents to a profound hunger for the truth because of the contact with their Tiferet. Thus, besides the passive, what I call encounters between the sexes, there is a preoccupation with religion, politics, philosophy, psychology, and indeed any subject that can explain what is going on in the world and within oneself. In such a period of confusion, if the background is not secured in belief or discipline, the adolescent will be prone to try anything that offers promising answers. This could mean exploring ideas or modes of living as far from home as possible in order to establish individuality. In the case of most people, the pull to extremes is often no more than a protest against the convictions of their time and a passion to put things right. Yeah, I can remember those days. You're an 18-year-old kid, basically in college now, and you say, "Okay, we're going to change things. We're going to make things more the way it should be." And you come out later on and realize that you're basically, as I would think, just blowing smoke. Okay, that's just there's an attitude that comes along that it becomes very somewhat arrogant, and a lot of it's just blowing a lot of smoke because simply you haven't really lived. You're still living at home. You're not really solidified. Some of you don't have, in a lot of ways, don't have a job that's full time, so to speak. That type of thing. So you think you know something, but you don't know much because you haven't been put through the fire, so to speak. Such people come through their highly disturbed age with just a few physical bruises and maybe a psychological broken nose. Some, however, are lost and others even killed in youthful foolishness or adventure, even as some young tribesmen never return from their initiation because they went too far into a strange country. The irony and the test of the adolescent situation is that it is concealed, or concerned, I should say, with finding oneself. At this point, however, there is not enough life experience to differentiate the ego image of education from the self that hovers just beyond the limited line of consciousness stretched between Had and Nasad. And so the attention is usually directed down to Yasad and what adult image to acquire, I should say. This is often perceived in the form of ambition and the animal drive of the individual, or the flesh produces the most glamorous projections from pop stars, to Nobel Prize winners. Yeah, I can remember the people. It's just they become very they change dramatically. They're not the same person you knew maybe a year before, 2 years before. Suddenly, they're just somebody else and such, and you're just kind of like, what happened to them? What's going on here? Those who work best through actions will see themselves as great sportsmen or dancers, while the thinkers will want to be esteemed scientists or philosophers. The feelers will yearn to be famous poets or musicians. For a period, these fantasies will be held as real possibilities until the young person realizes that the work involved may be more than they are prepared to do or beyond their talents. This is the first sign of maturity, as the process of development brings them closer to temporal, the place of truth. In some cases, the image is not seen as an impossible ambition, and the ego clings onto it long after physical maturity has been reached. Fortunately, life chips away the fantasy, which is often based upon infantile desires for attention rather than a real search for selfhood. Most people find that their proper level, accepting that to be a good number two, three, or four, is the best they could ever do, so as to see the stress such top positions carry. A few do hold on tight to their decided dream, and if it is not a true vision, they can become neurotic and then, in extreme cases, psychotic, as they live their fantasies and neglect reality. Kabbalastically, this is when the path between the ego and the self is blocked by a decision, by a delusion, and integrity is lost. This path between Yasod and temporal is maintained by most people to a greater or lesser degree. In some, it is no more than a dull recognition that honesty exists, although it may or may not be practical at work or in the home. In others, it is important enough to check their conduct at work or in personal relationships. And in yet others, it can generate a desire to guide the community into what is right according to the code of that society. In a few, it is more than just obeying the conventions. They will seek to know what is right for them in terms of self-development. The perception that there is more to life than begetting families or becoming successful holds such people at a certain disadvantage, because while they are still preoccupied with what and who they are, others who have now filled out this triad in the human animal level forge ahead and make their way in the world. Here we see the fully developed natural man and woman who wants to be the kings and queens of the generation until they are displaced by the up and coming of the next. The seeker, that is, of sometimes he or she knows not what, is somehow never fully involved in these games of material possession or social status. They are what has been defined by some as outsiders. Of these, some are simply seeking to avoid reality and to disappear into the dream existence of a eccentric recluse, if they can manage it, or of a vagabond if they cannot. Most other seekers, it must be said, can be quite competitive artisans and professional people, or may be found in the home, office, or factory. They occur in the boardroom and on the farm, in the studio, and in the military. These people are not outwardly that unusual, but they differ from the rest in that they recognize a sense of inner or other life. In most, it is just a dim memory of coming from somewhere else. Many, alas, over the years forge as they become deeply enmeshed in work and family, but some still hold on this belief, seeking people like themselves who ask the same questions and feel that deep sense of being in exile from where they do not know. A few know why they are here. They have either not forgotten their instructions given before they came into the incarnation, or have slowly recalled that they had something to do while here on earth. This phenomenon is not uncommon, and indeed, statistically, researchers into social trends actually use some terms as, quote, inner directed, along with conspicuous consumers or animal people and survivors or the vegetable level of humanity. These categories relate to the lower face of the psychological tree. After spending their youth in the awakening triad, in which the opportunity for further development is offered, most people fall back to an optimum position to become fixed in one of the three sub-triads focused upon yasada ego. Thus, after their wild days, they sink below the Had-Mazad line of consciousness and live life out as a vegetable level of routine. Only the animal people and the inner-directed operatives in what is called in Kabbalah the Gadlut, I think that's how you pronounce it, Gadlut, or a greater state. This Had-Temporal-Nisad triad, however, can be used either to exploit others or be applied to self-development. The choice, as always, is there. Those in the Kanut, Katnut, or lesser state are those who prefer to remain in ego. Only a major crisis will shift them, you see. That is upward to Tifferel, like a pit disaster or personally shock that makes them awaken and starts to ask questions again. This can also occur to the animal person if they are traumatized by being displaced or found that success has a hollowness. Such a realization may move them into the position of seeking the self like the outsider, who knows that there are other stages of development beyond the crown of physical prime, as the place where the worlds of action, formation, and creation meet. The self allows the higher vehicle of psyche and spirit to engage fully with the physical. It is then that the physical organism is complete. And that's the completion of the chapter 23 today. So this is from Psychology and Kabbalah. We're going through, this is not quite halfway through the book. They're not really long chapters, but they do have a lot of meat in them. When I mean meat, there's some depth here, what he's talking about. And it's also what I would call something to do with a bite-sized type of thing. In other words, it's not overly, it's deep in some ways for some new people, but it's also a bite size. You're not going to be completely overwhelmed if you take chapter by chapter. So again, today is the Tuesday in November here. Just want to thank you for being here. Again, my name is Brant, B-R-A-N-T, last name is Hunt, and my channel is simply Discerning What is True. Thank you for being here. May you have a good day. Take care.